This little boy ran to me crying, saying the man wasn't his dad, and then the man started walking towards us. I thought we were all in danger. I remember it so clearly, it was terrifying. A few years ago, I was babysitting 3 little girls, aged 1, 4, and 6. After school, we went to a playground up on a hill. There were a few other parents and kids there. I was pushing the baby on the infant swing while keeping an eye on the older girls. Other families started leaving until it was just a boy, maybe around 3, playing with the girls I was watching. I noticed his dad sitting on a picnic bench, looking at his phone. I was a bit annoyed because it felt like I was suddenly watching 4 kids, not 3. Then, the boy wandered over to me and kind of snuggled up against me. I thought he wanted a hug, so I said, "Hey," and put my arm around him, asking if he was okay. He looked upset and then said, "He's not my dad." I glanced at the man, a bit confused, and asked, "Who is he?" "An uncle." "A stepdad?" The boy looked me straight in the eye and said, "I don't know." My stomach dropped, and I instantly went into protective mode, instinctively pulling the boy behind me. I turned back to see the man walking towards us, and my heart was racing. I told the girls we were leaving, and I picked up the baby. They grumbled a bit, but they walked towards where we'd left our bikes. With my back to the man, I scanned the area, but there was no one else around except some people walking on the street down the hill, people I could yell to for help if needed. I told him to stay back and held on to the boy tightly. He asked what I was doing, looking at my hand on the boy's. I felt panicked and took a step back. He told me to let him go. I told him what the boy had said and that I would scream if he touched the boy or me, glancing at the people on the street so he knew we weren't completely isolated. He gave a nervous little laugh and spoke to the boy, but the boy didn't even look at him or move. I told him to leave us alone. He just stared at me in shock, holding his hands up like I was the dangerous one. I said I was calling the police, let go of the boy, and pulled out my phone, still holding the baby. He panicked and said he was the boy's stepdad, or soon-to-be stepdad. I said, "Really?" He explained that he was dating the boy's mom, and she was at work, so he picked the boy up from school and brought him here to wait for her. I didn't believe him, so I started dialing, preferring to let the police sort it out, just to be safe. I spoke, my voice shaking, and motioned for the boy to stay close to me, away from the man. The boy was silently crying, the poor kid was terrified. The man was getting really agitated, his face turning red, which made me even more nervous. What if he tried to hurt me or the kids? My daughters were watching from the bikes, asking what was happening. The worst part was the waiting for the police to arrive. He was between me and the girls, and I was between him and a fence. The police arrived quickly, thankfully. I explained everything, and the man tried to explain his side. Thankfully, the police were also suspicious of him. It seemed I wasn't overreacting. I told the boy he did the right thing by coming to me for help, and then a female officer took him aside. The man called his girlfriend, the boy's mom, and asked her to come down. I didn't want to just leave because the boy had come to me for help and comfort, and I felt responsible, so I let my girls keep playing while we waited for his mom, who arrived soon after. The boy ran to her crying as soon as he saw her. The police explained the situation, I explained the situation, and the boy's mom was really embarrassed. I practically gave her and the man a lecture for scaring me, my daughters, and especially the boy. The boy barely knew the man, barely recognized him, didn't understand what he was to him, and was clearly uncomfortable around him. He was too young to understand the concept of mom's boyfriend not being dad, and it's hard to remember someone you've only met a few times when you're that little. She was very apologetic. I was glad he hadn't just trusted a stranger, as many kids do, trusting strangers or people they know. It's hard enough dealing with parents dating. Eventually, I left with my daughters. I had a diaper to change. I felt bad for the man afterward because he was just trying to do his girlfriend a favor and build a relationship with the kid, and the boy's mom probably thought it was a good way for them to bond, but they hadn't considered the boy's feelings or how it would look to an outsider. But it left me shaken. I thought he was a child predator, that he was going to kidnap him, and that he would hurt me and or the kids. Update 1. After the whole playground incident, I thought that was the end of it. I went home and told my friends about it, and they all said I was absolutely right to intervene, and even my mom said I might have saved that boy from something worse. But then, a few days later, something happened that made me question everything again. I was at the same playground with my daughters because it's their favorite place. They love the swings and the little slide. I was sitting on a bench, my 2 older daughters were riding their bikes on the path, and the baby was asleep in the stroller. Everything was peaceful, and then guess who I saw? Yep, the same guy. This time, he was walking with the boy's mom. I saw them from a distance and immediately felt a knot in my stomach. They were holding hands, and the boy was walking ahead of them, kicking stones or something. They didn't notice me at first, and I just sat there, trying not to freak out. The boy's mom was looking around, kind of scanning the playground, and then her eyes landed on me. She gave an awkward little smile, like she recognized me but wasn't sure if she should come over. The man's face went red, and he started whispering something to her. I thought, okay, maybe they're just here to play, but I still couldn't help feeling really uneasy. The boy ran off to play on the slide, and the boy's mom started walking towards me. She said, "Hi, I just wanted to say I'm really sorry about the other day, and I wanted to thank you for looking out for my son." She seemed sincere, but it still felt weird. The man was standing back, pretending to be really interested in his phone. I said, "It's no problem, I just did what I thought was right." Then I asked her, "Is he okay?" He seemed really scared. She looked a bit uncomfortable and said, "He's fine, we talked to him about it, and I think he understands now that this is someone he can trust." But here's where things got really strange. The boy was playing on the slide, and the man was still just standing there, not interacting with him or doing anything. The boy's mom kept looking back at him, like she was waiting for him to do something. She said, "We're really trying to build their relationship, you know, it's a bit complicated." She didn't elaborate, but I could tell there was more to it. Then, the boy suddenly ran back over to us, clutching a little toy car, looking really distressed. He said, "Mommy, I don't want to be here." The boy's mom crouched down to try and comfort him, but he pulled away from her and stared at the man. He didn't say anything, but the look on his face was pure fear. My protective instincts kicked in again, and I watched the man closely. He just stood there, looking really awkward. He said, "Come on, buddy, we talked about this, I'm your friend." But the boy just shook his head and hid behind his mom. She tried to calm him down, but it was clear he wanted nothing to do with this man. The boy's mom looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, he's just going through a phase, he'll come around eventually." I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place, but in my head, I was thinking, if your kid is this uncomfortable, maybe you should listen to him. They left soon after, the boy's mom carrying him, and he was clinging to her like his life depended on it. The man followed behind them, looking annoyed. I just sat there, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. The next day, I was scrolling through Facebook during my daughter's nap time and saw a post in a local moms group. Someone was sharing a warning about a man acting suspiciously around kids at playgrounds. There were no photos, but the description sounded eerily familiar. As I read through the comments, my heart started racing. Some moms said they'd seen him before, just hanging around by himself, not with any kids of his own. Others said he was probably harmless, but there was a lot of back and forth. I didn't know what to do. Part of me felt like I should comment and share what had happened to me, but then again, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. What if it wasn't the same guy? What if I was wrong? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few days later, I was back at the playground with my daughters. It was our routine for several weeks, and I didn't want to change it because of this weird situation, but this time, I was much more vigilant about everyone around us. I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning for anything suspicious. Then, as we were getting ready to leave, I saw him again. He was sitting on a bench by himself, no boy, no mom, just him. He had a coffee cup in one hand and his phone in the other, but he wasn't really doing anything, just sitting there watching. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was pounding. I started walking my daughters towards the parking lot, keeping my eyes on him the whole time. As we pulled away, he looked up and made eye contact with me. It wasn't a friendly look, it was more like he was sizing me up. I don't know if I was imagining things, but it sent chills down my spine. I got my daughters into the car as quickly as I could and drove home, feeling like I was being watched the entire way. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything in my head, wondering if I was overreacting or if this guy was genuinely a problem. I decided to report the Facebook post to the police, just in case. I didn't give his name because I didn't know it, but I told them about the incident at the playground and his ongoing behavior. They said they would look into it, but I didn't know if anything would come of it. A week went by, and I was still on edge. Then, one morning, I got a call from a mom in the group. She said, "Hey, I saw your comment on that post, and I think I know who you're talking about." She told me she'd seen him at other playgrounds around town, always alone, always watching. She'd even taken a picture of him because she felt it was odd. She sent me one of the photos, and my stomach dropped. It was definitely him. Now I was really freaked out because this wasn't just a coincidence. This guy was hanging around where kids were, with no reason to be there, and no one knew who he was. I started to think this was much more serious than I initially thought. Update 2, after that, things continued to get weirder. I thought reporting the guy would be the end of it, but I was so wrong. A few days later, I was dropping my daughters off at their school's daycare as usual. Everything seemed fine at first, but then I noticed a familiar car parked across the street from the school. It was the same guy's car, I was pretty sure, because I'd seen it at the playground before, an old gray sedan with a dent in the back fender. At first, I told myself it was just a coincidence, it was a public street, anyone could park there. But then I saw him. He was sitting in the driver's seat, not getting out, just watching. My stomach churned, and I tried not to panic. I thought, okay, maybe he's picking someone up or waiting for something, but he didn't move, he just sat there staring at the school. I decided to pull over and watch him for a bit. I wasn't going to leave my daughters with this guy lurking around. After about 10 minutes, he finally started his car and drove away, but before he did, he looked right at me. That's when I knew for sure he'd noticed me. My hands were shaking as I drove away, trying to focus on the road and not completely freak out. That evening, I was chatting with another mom from the local group, and I told her what had happened. She said, "You need to call the school and let them know." So, the next morning, I called the principal and explained everything. Thankfully, she took it seriously and said they would keep an eye out. They even had a school resource officer who could patrol the area during drop-off and pick-up times. A few days later, I was back at the playground with my daughters. It had been quiet there since the car incident, and I was hoping maybe he'd moved on or been scared off by the police. My daughters were on the swings, and I was sitting on a bench, scrolling through my phone. Then, all of a sudden, the boy's mom showed up. She looked exhausted, like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. She was holding the boy's hand, and he looked just as tired as she did. She walked over to me and said, "Can we talk?" I was taken aback, but I said yes. She sat down next to me, and the boy stayed close to her, clutching her arm like he was afraid to let go. She started by apologizing again for what had happened at the playground, but then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said, "I think you were right to be worried about him, there's something not right about him." I was shocked and asked her what she meant. She told me that since the incident, she'd started noticing things about him that she hadn't seen before, like how he would ask her questions about her son, even really inappropriate ones, or how he would get really defensive whenever she mentioned their relationship or her parenting. She said, "I don't know how I didn't see it before, but he's been trying to insert himself into our lives in a way that just feels wrong." She started crying as she said this, and I tried to comfort her while also feeling a mix of anger and fear. She told me that she'd been keeping her distance from him since the police were involved, but he kept texting her, saying he just wanted to make things right and prove he wasn't a bad person. I asked her if she'd told the police about this, and she said no, because she was scared. She didn't want to escalate things and make him angry, but she was also terrified for her son. I told her she needed to go to the police, this wasn't something to take lightly. She nodded, but I could tell she was still hesitant. As we were talking, the boy suddenly looked up and said, "He's here." My heart sank. I looked around, and sure enough, there he was, standing at the edge of the playground, just watching us. He wasn't even trying to hide it. The boy's mom froze, and I could see the panic in her eyes. I told her to take the boy to her car, and I would call the police. She grabbed the boy and started walking quickly towards the parking lot. The man didn't move at first, but then he started following them. I was on the phone with 911, trying to describe what was happening, while also keeping my eyes on him. He wasn't running or doing anything, just walking behind them, but it was enough to make my blood boil. The boy's mom got to her car and locked the doors, and the man stopped a few feet away, just standing there. The police arrived just as I was still on the call. They went over to him, and he started playing innocent, like he didn't know what was going on, but the boy's mom got out of her car and started yelling at him, telling the police everything she'd been holding back. It turned out he'd lied to her about a lot of things, about his job, his background, even his name. The police took him away, and the boy's mom thanked me over and over for intervening. She said she was going to file a restraining order and do everything she could to protect her son. I felt a huge sense of relief that it was finally over, but I was also shaken to the core. I kept thinking about how much worse things could have been. My daughters kept asking me why the police took the bad man away, and I just told them it was because he wasn't being nice. I'm still processing everything, but one thing I know for sure, I'll never ignore my gut feeling again.